everybody. Welcome to this virtual session for SUSECON, building your multi-cloud data analytics data pipeline with SAP Data Hub. My name is Divyesh Vaidya. I'm a partner business development manager with Dell Technologies. And I also have co-presenting with me, John.
Hi, this is John Von Voris. I'm the Director of Cloud Solutions at SUSE. My role is to build the application ecosystem around our software and our products. All right, Divyesh, why don't you kick off with the agenda?
Thank you, John. Yes, hi. So the agenda for today is I've got three main bullet points. First of all, we're going to talk about very quickly what Dell and SUSE are doing for infrastructure for SAP. And then we're going to go on to what Data Hub is and what are some of the use cases that are driving this technology. And then finally, we're going to go look into the reference architectures that Dell Technologies and SUSE have jointly built for SAP Data Hub. So to kick this off, first of all, I just wanted to, in case you may or may not be aware of work that Dell and SUSE are doing for SAP, just wanted to show you a brief highlight of the 20+ years that Dell's been working on infrastructure technologies for SAP. So as you can see, we have a lot of work we're doing around just certifications of our infrastructure for SAP, all the way to we have world-leading benchmarks for SAP applications and SAP HANA that we have jointly created with SUSE. We are working jointly with SUSE in our Waldorf partner port on solutions, including this Data Hub reference architecture we're going to talk about that's being developed jointly with SUSE. So we have a lot of joint initiatives that we're working on to be able to provide that to our customers on how they can deploy and work on the SAP applications and HANA on Dell and SUSE. So if you look at where SAP is heading today, it's broadly we can divide it into three areas, right? So it's like a lot of transformations happening in the SAP space. As you all know, the primary one is SAP, once they launched SAP HANA maybe about 10 years ago, and S4 HANA, the new ERP, just launched a couple of years after that. We still have a lot of customers who are on legacy ERP that will want to move to S4 HANA through 2027. So that's a big transformation project that's going on. The secondly is where do you want to place those workloads, right? So you hear a lot about cloud from SAP and then partners, but we view as a cloud as an operating model. So when you talk about cloud, you're looking at it could be public cloud, it could be a managed cloud, it could be a hybrid cloud, it could be private cloud. So a lot of different options from a cloud, from a operating model. And the third part is, once you have this move to HANA and S4 HANA, SAP is developing a lot of technologies around data intelligence, right? Saying like, how do I leverage all this data that's already sitting in my ERP, and also data that I can collect from, things like IoT devices, things like a lot of things like technologies around like blockchain, ML, AI, that I can apply to this disparate data that's sitting there, and then provide more intelligence. So these are sort of things that broadly that SAP is working on. And if we look at where Dell and then SUSE are helping our customers is within those three areas. Look at the S4 HANA move. So this requires a new dynamic infrastructure to be able to host the infrastructure for SAP. Not only is this supposed to be a fast, efficient environment, but also leveraging a lot of modern technologies such as software-defined infrastructure, cloud-ready models. So that's all the kind of things that they're helping customers as they move their journey towards cloud. Now, as I mentioned earlier, cloud to us is an operating model. Cloud does not necessarily equate to public cloud only. Customers are looking from a cloud model from a operating model. They're looking at from a OpEx model. So as we can help customers look at those choices around if they want to have a governance and control from a private cloud environment, or to be able to have a hosted environment from a managed cloud providers, or even hybrid cloud environments whereby they may want to keep some mission critical environments on premise or closely governed, but some things that are maybe test development environments or non-mission critical environments that they can be able to put in public cloud, right? So sort of hybrid cloud models. And then the third part here around the intelligence. So Dell's been working a lot around what we are calling our edge to core cloud platform, looking at developing new technologies and capabilities wherever the customer data resides, whether it's out the edge with a lot of IoT sensor type capabilities to be able to collect that, or looking at processing data at the edge. And also a lot of new powerful GPU-enabled platforms available for a lot of machine learning, AI type workloads that customers are working on to be able to help process that. So that's how we are mapping a lot of the work that we are doing to where SAP and our SAP customers are headed. So here's just a quick visualization of a lot of the infrastructure that we provide for, and this is very SAP HANA centric, but this applies to any SAP applications as well. We do have a lot of different types of environments available for customers, whether they want to use disparate servers and storage that they want to put together. Whether they're looking at converged or hyper-converged environments for software-defined. We have all those choices for our customers, and then we also have our specialists available to help customers to be able to make the right choice for the right platforms that are the most efficient for them for their SAP technologies. So having talked about some of the information about what we do today around SAP, I want to spend the rest of the time, John and I, around SAP Data Hub. So I'm assuming most of you with SAP Data Hub, but broadly, this is SAP's technology to try to solve problems around data. If you can imagine, most enterprises have data sitting in lots of multiple areas. So there's lots of things that can be done if you're able to access all the data that's available throughout your environment or throughout the enterprise. So if you look at this map here going from left to right, if you have data that's sitting on any of the things around, whether it be on-premise or any cloud environments, and any type of data source, right? So they may be sitting in different types of technologies. Could be sitting in a data warehouse, could be sitting on a database, could be just data coming in from an application environment, from unstructured data, right? So lots of different ways to be able to collect the data, even IoT data, right? So all that information can be collected through Data Hub. And then be able to now be made, apply some intelligence to that, right? So leveraging a lot of the SAP analytics or AI machine learning capabilities. Could be SAP, it could be some of the third parties, but be able to bring in all of this data and have some actionable intelligence out of that. And that's what essentially what Data Hub is. And then the main benefits out of that are sort of highlighted here, right? So the main points here around first is discovering and combining the data from all your enterprise sources. The primary thing here is that we are not treading on any privacy laws or any government type country laws. You can keep the data where it is. You're not moving the data. You just just basically integrating the information from an intelligence perspective. So discovering the data from all the different sources. And then these concept of data pipelines within Data Hub is to be able to now enrich that data so that you are normalizing that information from disparate sources into something that's actionable. And that there is things they can do around scheduling and execution of data workflows, so to have the right operations around your data. And the last part here, which is pretty important, is the governance and the security, right? So that make sure that the data is only accessible by the right people who need to have access to that, and so that the security controls are in place, data privacy is in place. So this is the Data Hub that becomes a platform that you can leverage to be able to now, collect this information from disparate sources and to provide some actionable information out of that. So here are some example use cases that SAP Data Hub can be deployed for, right? So some use cases here are things like IoT data. So as you look to different vertical environments, for let's say manufacturing as an example, you want to be able to collect information out of your data in your manufacturing plant, and to be able to integrate that with your ERP data around the information that already exists on that equipment, and then get real-time information from IoT data streams to say, well, here's all the different plant equipment that I have. How are they performing today or right now? And then what kind of things do I need to do any kind of take any action on from a predictive maintenance perspective, so that I'm actually on top of it rather than that failing. That collecting of that data, then you can basically apply things like artificial intelligence, machine learning characteristics to that, to go beyond predictive maintenance to now look at applying ML strategies to now not just really predictive, but also to be able to sort of go beyond that and look to sort of making that more efficient. There are other examples around things like data warehousing. So like I said, we have these data collecting from different environments or areas to be able to have a data warehouse to with data that is residing in different locations. Be able to sort of centrally point to that from a data house perspective. And then finally, the piece I mentioned earlier around data governance becomes very important now that you have a ability to manage data across your entire enterprise, applying governance to that, so the data goes to is available to the right people at the right time. So I talked a little bit about what Data Hub is and some example use cases. I'll turn this over now to John. He's going to talk about a specific example and then look at the reference architecture for SAP Data Hub with Dell Technologies and SUSE. John?
Thanks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, this is a use case that actually exists out in the wild. What we're going to talk about here, this is a manufacturing process. You could see how this could be go to different industries, very similar to what we see in the oil field, very similar to what we see in automobile manufacturing. Essentially, for this use case, we have an injection molding process. So imagine we're going to put together, let's say, a steering wheel, and we have to inject plastic into a mold. What we're trying to do is we're trying to optimize the quality of that casting, and also figure out how many of those we can crank out as fast as possible while not impacting quality. And so there are a lot of metrics that we gather, which are very much real-time metrics, like temperature, the feed pressure of the plastics into the press, feed rates for raw materials, those kind of things. And that's stored in a streaming database. The one that seems pretty popular right now is Apache Kafka. There are others, but that's just one of the inputs you can use with Data Hub. On the other side, you potentially might be using, say, an infrared camera to look at the mold to make sure that there are no hot spots, to make sure that the heat is evenly distributed. Now, in order to process that information, that's going to take putting that into a Hadoop cluster or some kind of image processing that is not real time, because you're going to have to perform a lot of operations on that information. So in this particular case, the infrared images are stored into a data lake with a Hadoop cluster. You end up using SAP Vora to integrate that with HANA. The problem is you've got two data streams that aren't correlated in terms of timing, because one of them is real time, the other one is done with a delay to it. So what SAP allows you to do is that you use Data Hub to build a data pipeline that correlates the two databases and puts them together. And then that is copied into a HANA database. And I use predictive analytics to figure out how to tweak and tune the process. That will tell me how many of these I can pop out before I start experiencing quality problems. It potentially could tell me when I'm going to have to perform maintenance on the equipment. So there's a lot of information you're going to get out of this that's going to improve your overall throughput for the system. Now I can match that up with my ERP system. And if you look at the inputs, in this case, it's just a raw material like plastic, but I can look at my ERP system and I can see if I have enough inventory on hand for the production rates I want. I can see if I do have quality problems, which supplier caused those problems and what lot of materials. So it kind of gathers everything about the manufacturing of that specific item into one place. And I can use machine learning and predictive analytics to optimize everything. And so I've used SAP Data Hub to gather all these streams and pipelines, put it into S/4HANA, do analysis of it, and the output of that is essentially an application that's going to give me a much higher yield, higher quality, and I basically keep everything flowing smoothly, including my supply chain. So it's end-to-end manufacturing of this widget with all the different inputs and outputs all compensated for in the tool. You could, what happens if I'm out of plastic? Well, you could see how that affects your supply chain and your delivery. So it's one place to go for everything related to that specific manufactured object. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on what the user interface looks like, but what I can tell you is traditionally, you could build these pipelines and you'd write a bunch of custom scripts that would take the data. It has to be translated into different forms. And as soon as you change anything in the process, you almost have to start from scratch again. The nice thing about the way Data Hub operates is they have some standard procedures that you can use, kind of a drag and drop interface, and you can create your pipeline that way. If you have any custom things you need to write, you can write specific code. You can put it into a reusable module and use it just like any of the other tools that SAP provides. That means that everything here is very repeatable. It means it's very easy, relatively speaking, to do. And you don't have to recreate the wheel every time something changes a little. So there's a lot of time savings in doing things this way. And it also visually can help you figure out where all the processes fit. So this is a much easier way for you to develop your data pipeline. Other things that are part of this interface, for example, governance. If you look at the different data sources, you may have access to most of them, but not all of them. And this interface will let you know that you potentially don't have access to certain pieces of data. You'll also be able to go into this interface and look at the metadata. So Data Hub will go through and look at all your the metadata for all of your pipeline and see what's available. So you can actually find out some of the different data types that are available for you to work with. So it's a great tool for knowing what's going on, a great tool for finding new data that you didn't know existed, and a great place to see everything in one spot. So now we're going to start talking about how you would actually implement this on Dell Technologies gear. So if you look at the overall architecture for this, there are a lot of different moving pieces. You're managing metadata, you've got your pipeline development, you've got workflows, making sure the governance is lined up. You have SAP runtimes that are working on this. So there's a lot of things going on. Like everything SAP does, the architecture behind Data Hub is a certified architecture. So in order for you to get SAP support, you have to go to SAP, look at their certification documentation. It's an SAP note that we have at the end that you can check. And it will tell you who's certified on each system, what level, which versions, all of that. That's common practice for SAP. They do that for HANA. They do that for all of their software. It's important that whatever architecture you end up with is certified by them, because you'll need to get support, and they will tell you to go back to that certified architecture in order to get help. So that's why it's important for us to set these things up and to get them certified, so that you have confidence that if you use it, that you can get full support. There are also options for Data Hub with managed service providers like VirtuStream. The hypercloud providers also have some certified versions of Data Hub. So you have a lot of different options. For on-prem, the option we're going to talk about for here, this is, we're going to talk about how you would implement that in your own data center. Where you implement SAP Data Hub is important. So if all of your data is in the cloud, it would mostly make sense to put your Data Hub implementation in the cloud. If most of your SAP data is going to be on-premise, then it makes more sense to do your Data Hub implementation on-premise. It's just wherever the majority of the data that's an input to the pipeline resides, that's where you want to put Data Hub. So in this case, most of our customers to date have their data on-prem, their production data. So most of the customers we've seen have done their final production version of Data Hub in-house. We do have some customers that have done cloud-based Data Hub, but that was mostly for proof of concept. But when they do production, it's usually in-house. Now, the way this is implemented for SAP, they have dictated that you need a Kubernetes cluster and containers to run SAP Data Hub. This is the first piece of their software that's going to be made available as a containerized application. We see this as going forward, SAP is going to put more and more of their applications into containers. This makes it transportable. It means that you can bring it on-prem or you can bring it to the cloud. It makes it easier for them to support because they have so many different versions. So go forward, we anticipate that SAP is going to push the majority of their applications into a container environment. They're even talking about SAP HANA at this point, which is a kind of a technology demo, but I could see maybe 3 or 4 years from now where even HANA becomes a containerized platform. So in this particular case, this slide is the architecture from a server perspective. It's basically 2 pieces. There's a Kubernetes cluster, which is the SAP, which is where all the Data Hub is going to reside. And then there's a storage cluster, which is SUSE Enterprise Storage. That cluster, the reason you need that is because SAP requires a dynamic volumes, and that just can't be done easily with iSCSI. So if you're going to implement this on-prem, you need a Ceph-based cluster to do it. And there's certainly a lot of information in the SAP notes on how to do that. So if you look at the installation order, first you're going to have a management workstation. That can typically that's going to be a virtual machine in VMware or KVM, and there's an installer that goes with that and kube control, and then there's a Data Hub installer. So that you start with a VM that's kind of your main workstation. Then you install the storage cluster, which is a Ceph-based cluster. And that's got to be in place before you install your Kubernetes, because Kubernetes will be attaching to that storage cluster. After that, you create a private Docker registry. For our demo purposes, we use something called Portis, which is our version of a Docker registry, but you're free to use whichever Docker registry you're comfortable with. And after that is set up and working, then you're going to install SAP Data Hub. The current version is 2.7. That'll be changing shortly, and we'll talk a little bit about where that's going. Now, being successful at this is not all that different from other IT projects in that you have to be very careful there's not a lot of scope creep. Once you start using this, you're going to see an amazing number of opportunities to expand, and it's so flexible of a tool that you'll be using it in a lot of places you hadn't expected. In order to get started, though, it's important that you kind of lock down what you expect to get out of it and put kind of a border up and say, until we get this working and running, this is exactly what we're going to do. Because as soon as you get to feature creep, you're going to extend the installation process and potentially cause other problems. We've got some consultants lined up between Dell, SUSE, and SAP that have already done this at multiple customer sites. Two examples are Accenture and Avalon Consulting. There are several others. If you're not comfortable with setting this up yourself, or if you need help with some of the machine learning pieces, these partners can help you get this set up and going. They have experience. Make sure you're very diligent. You capture each of the problems to be resolved. Know what answers you need. There's help for you when you need it. And make sure that you've documented every data source that you're going to need. Most of the problems we've seen is that customers start the project and they find out that the system administrator didn't have access to a certain piece of data. They didn't have logon access, or they don't have the credentials to get into specific data. And they usually solve that problem, but it does cause a lot of delays. So make sure that you've got your data governance in control and you know what data you're accessing, and the people setting up the pipeline have access to that data. And then lastly, there's sensitivity to latency. So if you can imagine in my example, I had a bunch of real-time data coming off of my sensors going to a Kafka database. But if that Kafka database is in the cloud, then you're adding a bunch of latency between your on-prem IoT and your cloud-based Kafka, and that potentially causes problems coordinating data. So, be sensitive to where you're putting each of these pieces depending on what you're trying to accomplish and where the data is being generated. And then lastly, put Data Hub in the data center that's closest to the majority of your data. If you do these things, you shouldn't have any problems. Okay, now going forward, just announced last month, SCP came out with Data Intelligence 3.0. This is a bit of a name change. It's SAP Data Hub is going to be called going forward. Basically, their data intelligence initiative before 3.0 is based on the SAP Cloud Platform. So outside of Data Hub, everything else that was part of this suite of tools was only available inside of their cloud platform. Their customers wanted other options. So what they've done now is they've taken what was only available on the cloud platform and made it available for you on-prem or for use on a hypercloud vendor. So essentially what that means is you sign up for a subscription or license and you can use it either on-prem or into a hypercloud vendor. So it's no longer limited just to SAP Cloud Platform. Now, if you've already licensed Data Hub 2.7 or you're going to, there's no additional cost for this new version. It's part of your maintenance agreement. Now you've got parity with everything that they offer on SAP Cloud Platform, including SAP Leonardo machine learning, plus predictive analytics and those things. They've also added in some of the machine learning training and inference operators and support for TensorFlow and PyTorch. These are all pieces now that are programmable within Data Hub. So, if you've used it before, these are now added into the menu and you can add it into your pipeline. There's a little bit of a learning curve associated with this, but once you get used to it, it is incredibly fast and repeatable. And once you're comfortable with it, you'll never want to go back to manually formatting your pipeline again. So what we've got for you is some additional information. There is a reference architecture that Dell and SUSE put together that will outline everything you need to put this together. We've got the different pieces for our Kubernetes platform, which is called CaaS, and the enterprise storage, how you set those up, some trade-offs. Do I use, do I use high-speed drives? Do I use spinning drives? All these things are considerations that you have to account for in terms of performance needed. We have deployment guides for each of these. And then SAP's got a number of documents that are going to help you along on the way. Obviously, the one you're going to be paying especially careful attention to is what is certified. The reference architecture we have is certified under SAP, so feel free to use that. There's a couple of SAP notes here, including how to install it from SAP's point of view, and all the prerequisites that are required for you to make sure that you've got everything set up before you start the setup. So that's our presentation for today. We are available for questions if you're listening to this live. If not, please contact us and we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.